I mentioned that External Affairs Minister of India has already responded to that question. Having said that, let me also mention it's a question of which frame of reference do you look at when you look at the priorities, interest, concerns expressed in the G20, both of G20 countries as a collective, but also of those countries that are outside the G20, but their interest, concerns and priorities are impacted upon what decisions get taken in the proceedings of the G20. We are welcoming, as I mentioned, heads of 41 delegations, heads of states, heads of government, heads of international organizations in Delhi since 7th for the coming 2 days, and our focus is, as Sherpa said earlier, to drive a consensus on priorities of the G20, how to structure in the priorities and interests of the global south into the G20 discussions, and how to bring together the leaders of the G20 and the leaders of the invited guest countries around that particular agenda. That is the theme, that is the objective that we are focused on, and we are very happy that by and large there is a strong effort by all the countries, all the delegations present to move towards a consensus. With regard to the African Union, Sherpa sir has already said that Honorable Prime Minister wrote a letter to all countries of the G20 proposing that African Union be included as a full member of the G20. We expect that the summit proceedings starting tomorrow morning would take a suitable decision on it. Shrikant ji, जो आपका प्रश्न था विदेशी छवि का,
your question about
वो केवल दिल्ली तक ही सीमित।
foreign image.
Shingla sir, if you have another question about organization.
Yeah, I think Rajji had asked this question about G20 being involving a massive effort and the organizational aspects behind it. And I did, in my opening remarks, say that it was not only a whole of government effort, but a whole of nation effort, because it is not only a huge exercise, but it is also an unprecedented exercise. We have never been president of the G20 before. This is also one of the most significant events we have organized, international events we have ever organized. And I think every Indian citizen, in a certain sense, is a stakeholder in this exercise, because the pride he feels of India hosting an event of this scale and magnitude with such level of success. So it certainly has been, an organizational effort that has gone across the country. But one aspect I think I'll just flag, an additionality which I want to put across, is that it has involved also an equal, let's say, collaboration, cooperation with every state and union territory in our country, because we have taken it down to the grassroots levels, and every state has seen this as an opportunity to promote the state's, tourism potential, recount its own developmental achievements, utilize the platform to highlight what every state in its own case has done. So from that aspect, as I said, it's a very fine example of cooperative federalism, and it has involved a level of cooperation that has gone from the central government to the states, to the municipalities, to the districts, and down to the grassroots levels. So I think if you look at the success of this presidency, it is guided at the highest levels, but it has also involved every citizen of our country.
Sherpa sir, if you have anything to add on that question.
No, I think Saurabh asked that question about the three key takeaways of what. Well, let me tell you that India has tried to build a huge India narrative to the G20. You will see this in the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, whether India has been the voice of the global south, whether India has been the spokesperson of the developing countries, whether we've brought in the huge amount of technological development that India has done through the digital public infrastructure. But I would suggest that it's not just three, but there are enormous number of lessons which come out of it, but you'll have to wait for the leaders' declaration to emerge. and you will then realize that it's that India will leave a huge imprint.
Thank you, sir. Tripti? So we can't accommodate everybody, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
The Wall.
Microphone, please.
Lahiri from the Wall
Closer,
Street
please.
Journal.
Yeah.
Hi, my question is about, so in addition to China and Russia's leadership not being here, we've also seen them coordinating at other forums, be that BRICS or elsewhere, that India is also part of. Do we see that there is a bifurcation, China, Russia on the one side coordinating more? And does that mean that the space for broad-based multilateral cooperation is shrinking?
Neeraj, at the back.
Sir, Neeraj, who News 18 India से
I'm Neeraj from News 18 and India, and my question is to Shri Amitabh Kant. After the last year's G20 summit, there was an outcome declaration that when we had the meeting of the finance ministers, there was no final outcome because there was opposition from Russia and China, and therefore they had changed. It seemed as if they had changed their minds after the Bali summit. So do you think that because of Ukraine there will be no outcome declaration?
Sir, this is Sridhar from the Asian Age. Sir, you mentioned that the New Delhi declaration is almost ready. Are we to assume that the consensus has been achieved on all issues? And will there be a separate chair's summary which will be issued at the end of the summit along with the joint communiqué? Will there be a separate chair's summary? Thank you.
Vishnu? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Vishnu Shom from NDTV. There's a World Bank report which has come out, which has praised India's digital public infrastructure. I'm just trying to understand, how is India going to disseminate this infrastructure? Will it be through an organization or an institution like the Solar Alliance?
There's a lady at the back, hand up there, I saw a long time ago. Yeah, you're the lady, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Ksenia, RT.com. A question is, since we discussed the global growth, has the issue of developed countries imposing unilateral sanctions been discussed, or the responsibility for imposing such sanctions which affects the global growth and especially the undeveloped countries? Has this been discussed as well, and will this figure in the communiqué probably?
Question here, yeah, you.
Reporter for Shanghai Media Group. So,
close the microphone.
Reporter from Shanghai Media Group. You mentioned that all participants show common interest in Global South, but I do believe there are different concerns between the Global South and the developed countries. So, how India presidency will show its decisiveness in this? Thank you.
Last question right at the back. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Correct.
So this is Rishabh from Times Now. So just last week, the Russian ambassador said that Indian negotiating team was under immense pressure, and there were teams that were trying to hijack the whole negotiation. If you can shed some light on that, how difficult it was during the negotiating time to come to a joint declaration, if that is possible, a day after.
I think, Rishabh, that question is answered. Anyway, so I'll pass on these questions. May I start with the Foreign Secretary, sir? You had some.
Okay. I think to the first question, which is sort of more of an interpretative frame of what is happening to the multilateralism and the related space globally, I think we would rather focus on what are the priorities in the G20, of the G20 countries, and in that, what is the priorities that India stands for and the rest of the Global South stands for. And I think the space that we come from is, our belief is that multilateralism needs to be reinvigorated, it needs to be inclusive, and it also needs to be an important center and a medium for global governance, which has to be more representative, naturally effective, transparent, and accountable. We have brought up these points strongly in the discussions in various meetings of the G20, including in particular the G20